A 10-month-old baby in rural Tennessee started babbling to an empty corner of her nursery every night at exactly 3 a.m. When her parents installed a baby monitor, they heard her clearly saying, "Mary, Mary." But she had never spoken a word before, and there was no one named Mary in the house. The autumn air in Sweetwater, Tennessee, carried the scent of dying leaves and would smoke as 28-year-old Sarah Patterson rocked her 10-month-old daughter Emma Grace to sleep in the old farmhouse nursery. It was October 15, 2023, and what should have been another peaceful evening was about to become the beginning of the most extraordinary experience the Patterson family had ever encountered. Sarah and her husband Jake had been married for 3 years, both raised in solid Methodist families that had farmed the rolling hills of East Tennessee for generations. The Patterson farm stretched across 150 acres of some of the most beautiful land in Monroe County, where Jake grew tobacco and corn while Sarah taught second grade at the local elementary school. Emma Grace was their miracle baby, born after 2 heartbreaking miscarriages that had tested their faith to its very limits. When Sarah finally carried Emma to full term, the entire congregation at Sweetwater Methodist Church had celebrated it as an answer to years of fervent prayer. "She's our little blessing," Sarah would tell anyone who asked about her daughter's unusually serene disposition. Emma Grace rarely cried, slept through the night from 6 weeks old, and had the most piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through people with an almost otherworldly awareness. But tonight, as Sarah placed Emma in her crib and whispered the same bedtime prayer she'd said every night since bringing her daughter home from the hospital, she had no idea that their peaceful routine was about to be shattered by something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about faith, miracles, and divine intervention. "Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep," Sarah whispered, stroking Emma's soft blonde hair. "Watch over our sweet girl, Jesus. Keep her safe through the night." Emma looked up at her mother with those remarkable blue eyes and, for just a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw recognition there. Not just of her as Mama, but of something deeper, more mysterious. "Sleep tight, baby girl." Sarah kissed Emma's forehead and tiptoed out of the nursery, leaving the door slightly cracked as she always did. The Patterson farmhouse had been built in 1923 by Jake's great-grandfather, a sturdy 2-story structure with wide front porches and tall windows that caught every breeze. Emma's nursery was on the 2nd floor, painted a soft yellow with white furniture that had been passed down through 3 generations of Patterson babies. Sarah and Jake's bedroom was directly across the hall from the nursery, close enough that they could hear Emma if she needed them, but far enough that normal baby sounds wouldn't wake them unnecessarily. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Sarah woke to the sound of Emma babbling. This wasn't unusual in itself. Babies often talked to themselves, practicing sounds and syllables as they developed language skills. But there was something different about tonight's babbling that made Sarah sit up in bed and listen more carefully. Emma's voice sounded conversational, like she was responding to someone. "Ba-ba-ba," came Emma's voice through the baby monitor, followed by a pause, then more distinct sounds. "Ma-mama." Sarah nudged Jake gently. "Honey, listen to Emma." Jake stirred but didn't fully wake. "She's fine, babe. Just talking to herself." But Sarah continued listening, and what she heard made her blood run cold. "Mary, Mary." The words were clear as a bell, spoken in Emma's sweet baby voice with perfect pronunciation. Sarah shot upright in bed, her heart pounding. "Jake," she whispered urgently. "Jake, wake up. What's wrong?" Jake mumbled, finally opening his eyes. Emma just said, "Mary." Clear as day. She said, "Mary," twice. Jake looked at his wife with the patient expression of someone accustomed to new mother anxiety. "Sweetheart, babies make all kinds of sounds. She's probably just practicing consonants." "No, Jake, I'm telling you," she said, "Mary. And she's never said any words before. Not mama, not dada, nothing." Through the monitor, they could hear Emma continuing to babble, her voice animated and joyful, as though she was having a delightful conversation with someone. Gaga, pretty. Mary, pretty. Both parents froze. Not only had Emma said Mary again, but she'd also said pretty, a word that was far beyond her developmental stage. What the hell? Jake whispered, now fully alert. Sarah was already out of bed, pulling on her robe. I'm checking on her. She crept across the hallway and peered through the crack in the nursery door. What she saw made her gasp softly. Emma was sitting up in her crib, something she'd only recently learned to do, facing the corner of the room where an antique rocking chair sat empty. But Emma wasn't looking at the chair. She was looking slightly above it, her face lit up with the most beautiful smile Sarah had ever seen. The baby was clearly engaged in conversation with someone, babbling happily and pausing as though listening to responses. Her little hands were reaching toward the empty corner, grasping at air as though trying to touch something, or someone, that wasn't there. Marie, sing. Emma said clearly, then dissolved into delighted giggles. Sarah's hands were shaking as she pushed the door open wider. The moment she stepped into the room, Emma turned toward her and pointed at the empty corner. Mama. Mary. Mary, pretty. Sarah felt her knees go weak. Not only had Emma said her first, Mama, but she was clearly trying to show Sarah someone named Mary who was apparently standing in the corner of the nursery. Emma, honey, Sarah whispered, approaching the crib slowly. What do you see, baby girl? Emma pointed again at the corner, bouncing excitedly. Mary. Mary, sing. Pretty dress. Sarah looked toward the corner where Emma was pointing. She saw nothing but the old rocking chair and the flowered wallpaper that had been there since Jake's childhood. But Emma was clearly seeing something, someone, that filled her with joy. Jake appeared in the doorway, having heard Emma's excited chatter through the monitor. What's she doing? He asked quietly. She's talking to someone named Mary. She says Mary is pretty and that Mary sings. Jake stepped into the room and looked toward the corner where Emma continued to point and babble. There's nobody there, Sarah. I know that. But Emma clearly sees someone. They stood watching their daughter for several more minutes as she carried on her animated conversation with her invisible friend. Emma would babble and gesture, then pause and listen intently, then giggle and clap her hands as though delighted by whatever she was hearing. Mary love Emma, the baby said clearly, patting her own chest. Mary love baby. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. The pure joy on Emma's face, the clear conviction in her voice. Their daughter was experiencing something profound and beautiful, even if they couldn't see it. Maybe we should call Dr. Henderson in the morning, Jake suggested. Make sure everything's normal. Jake, look at her. She's not distressed or sick. She's happy. She's having a conversation with someone who clearly loves her very much. After about 20 minutes, Emma seemed to grow tired. She waved at the empty corner and said, Bye-bye, Mary. Tomorrow. Then she lay down in her crib, put her thumb in her mouth, and was asleep within minutes. Sarah and Jake returned to their bedroom in stunned silence. What do you think that was about? Jake asked as they settled back into bed. I don't know. But Jake, she's never said words like that before. Pretty, sing, love. Those are advanced vocabulary words for a 10-month-old. Maybe she's just developing faster than we expected. But Sarah wasn't convinced. There had been something otherworldly about the entire experience. The way Emma had looked toward that corner with such focused attention, the joy on her face, the clarity of her speech, it all pointed to something beyond normal child development. The next morning, Emma woke up her usual cheerful self, but she had clearly retained the previous night's experience. At breakfast, she pointed toward the kitchen window and said, Mary come back? Sarah nearly dropped her coffee cup. "Emma, honey, who is Mary?" Emma smiled her angelic smile and said, "Mary nice. Mary love Emma." Over the next several days, the 3 a.m. conversations became a regular occurrence. Every night, Emma would wake up at exactly the same time and begin talking to her invisible friend Mary. Sarah and Jake took turns listening through the baby monitor and occasionally checking on Emma in person. The conversations were always joyful and animated on Emma's part. She would tell Mary about her day in her limited vocabulary, show Mary her toys, and apparently listen to Mary sing, because Emma would often try to hum along to melodies that only she could hear. But what troubled Sarah and Jake the most wasn't the conversations themselves, it was Emma's rapidly advancing language skills. Within a week, Emma was speaking in short sentences, using vocabulary that was months beyond her developmental stage, and demonstrating an understanding of concepts that seemed impossible for a 10-month-old baby. "Mary says flowers grow because God loves them," Emma announced one morning over breakfast, as clearly as if she were 3 years old instead of barely 10 months. Sarah and Jake exchanged worried glances. They had never discussed God or flowers growing with Emma in those terms. "Emma, what else does Mary tell you?" Sarah asked gently. "Mary says Jesus is her boy. Mary says she takes care of babies when their mamas are sleeping." Jake set down his coffee cup harder than necessary. "Sarah, we need to talk to Pastor Williams." Pastor David Williams had been the minister at Sweetwater Methodist Church for 12 years. He was a kind, practical man in his 50s who had guided the congregation through births, deaths, celebrations, and crises with steady wisdom and genuine faith. When Sarah and Jake approached him after Sunday service and asked for a private meeting, he could see the worry in their faces. "What's troubling you folks?" Pastor Williams asked as they settled into his study that afternoon. Sarah and Jake took turns explaining Emma's nighttime conversations, her advanced speech development, and her apparent relationship with someone named Mary. Pastor Williams listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking questions for clarification. "And you're certain she's saying Mary?" he asked. "Clear as day," Jake confirmed. "She talks about Mary's pretty dress, Mary singing, Mary loving babies. And Pastor, the things she says, they're not things we've taught her." "What kind of things?" "Yesterday she said Mary told her that angels watch over children when they sleep," Sarah explained. "She's 10 months old. We've never discussed angels with her." Pastor Williams was quiet for a long moment, steepling his fingers as he considered their story. "Have you considered that Emma might have an unusually active imagination?" he finally asked. "Pastor, she couldn't even say, Mama, 2 weeks ago," Jake replied. "Now she's having theological conversations with an invisible woman named Mary. That's not imagination. That's something else entirely." "What do you think it is, Jake?" Jake looked uncomfortable. "I don't know. But Sarah thinks it might be." He trailed off, unable to voice what they'd both been thinking. "I think it might be the Virgin Mary," Sarah said quietly. "The mother of Jesus. I think she's appearing to Emma." Pastor Williams's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a significant claim, Sarah. Why would you think that?" "Because of the things Emma says. She talks about Mary having a son named Jesus. She says Mary takes care of babies. She says Mary loves children. And Pastor, the piece on Emma's face when she's talking to Mary, it's not of this world. Have you considered consulting a pediatrician? Perhaps there's a medical explanation for Emma's sudden language development." "We have an appointment with Dr. Henderson tomorrow," Jake said. "But Pastor, what if this is real? What if God is allowing Emma to see something we can't see?" Pastor Williams leaned back in his chair. "In our Methodist tradition, we believe that God can work through anyone, including children. The Bible tells us that Jesus said, 'Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." "So you think it's possible?" Sarah asked hopefully. "I think we should approach this with both faith and wisdom. Continue documenting what Emma says and does. Pray for discernment. And let's see what Dr. Henderson has to say about her development." That evening, Sarah set up a video camera in Emma's nursery, positioned to capture both Emma in her crib and the corner where she always looked during her conversations with Mary. At 3:17 a.m., like clockwork, Emma sat up and began her nightly chat. "Mary, you came back," Emma said joyfully, reaching toward the empty corner. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah and Jake watched in amazement as Emma carried on her side of a clearly two-way conversation. She would speak, then pause and listen intently, often nodding or shaking her head as though responding to questions. She laughed at things only she could hear and showed Mary her stuffed animals, holding them up toward the corner. "Mary, this is Bear Bear. Do you like Bear Bear?" Emma asked, holding up her favorite teddy bear. She paused, listening, then giggled. "Yes, Bear Bear is soft. Mary, will you sing the pretty song again?" Emma then began humming a melody that neither Sarah nor Jake recognized. It was hauntingly beautiful, unlike any lullaby they'd ever heard. When they reviewed the video the next morning, they could see Emma's animated conversation clearly, but the corner remained empty throughout the entire recording. Whatever or whoever Emma was seeing was invisible to both the naked eye and the camera. Dr. Henderson's examination the following day revealed a perfectly healthy, developmentally advanced baby girl. "Her physical development is right on track," the pediatrician explained. "But her language skills are remarkably advanced. Some children do experience sudden leaps in development, especially highly intelligent ones." "But doctor," Sarah pressed, "she went from no words to complete sentences in a matter of days. Is that normal?" "It's unusual, but not unheard of. Some children store up language internally and then seem to explode with vocabulary all at once. Emma appears to be exceptionally bright." Dr. Henderson's reassurance helped ease Jake's medical concerns, but it didn't explain the content of Emma's conversations or her knowledge of things they'd never discussed with her. That night, Sarah decided to try something different. Instead of just observing Emma's conversation with Mary, she would attempt to participate. At 3:17 a.m., when Emma began her usual animated chatter, Sarah quietly entered the nursery. "Emma, honey," she whispered. "Can Mama talk to Mary too?" Emma looked up at her mother with bright, excited eyes. "Mary, this is Mama," she said, pointing toward Sarah and then toward the empty corner. "Mama, Mary says hello." Sarah felt chills run down her spine. She looked toward the corner where Emma was pointing and saw nothing, but the air felt different somehow, warmer, more peaceful. "Tell Mary that Mama says hello too," Sarah whispered. Emma giggled and spoke toward the corner. "Mama says hello, Mary." There was a pause, then Emma turned back to Sarah with a serious expression beyond her months. "Mary says she's been waiting to meet you, Mama. Mary says she loves you too, and she's been watching over our family." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. "What else does Mary say, baby girl?" Emma listened intently to something only she could hear, then looked back at Sarah with wide, solemn eyes. "Mary says not to be afraid. Mary says God sent her to help take care of Emma because Emma is special. Mary says Emma has work to do when she gets bigger." The words sent a profound chill through Sarah's entire being. This was not the vocabulary of a 10-month-old baby. These were the words of someone conveying a message from beyond the physical world. "What kind of work, Emma?" Sarah whispered. Emma turned toward the corner and had what appeared to be a brief conversation, then turned back to her mother. "Mary says Emma will help other people believe in God's love. Mary says Emma will show people that heaven is real." Sarah sank into the old rocking chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was hearing. If this was real, If her baby daughter was actually receiving visits from the Virgin Mary, then Emma had been chosen for something extraordinary. Mary says, "Don't worry, Mama," Emma continued, reaching through the crib rails towards Sarah. Mary says she will always protect Emma. Mary says she protected Emma before Emma was born too. Sarah gasped. The miscarriages. Was Mary saying she had protected Emma even before she was conceived, ensuring that this pregnancy would be successful when the others had failed? Mary says you prayed for Emma every day, the baby continued. Mary says she heard all your prayers and asked Jesus to let Emma come to you. Now Sarah was crying openly. She had indeed prayed every day during her pregnancy with Emma, terrified of losing another baby, begging God to let this child survive. Emma seemed to listen to something else, then smiled. Mary says she has to go now, but she'll come back tomorrow. Mary says sweet dreams, Mama. Emma waved toward the corner, said, "Bye-bye, Mary," and lay down in her crib as peacefully as always. Sarah sat in the rocking chair for a long time after Emma fell asleep, trying to process what had just happened. If this was real, her daughter was receiving visitations from the Mother of God. If it wasn't real, then Emma was either experiencing some kind of psychological phenomenon or was perhaps the most gifted child actor in history. But in her heart, Sarah knew the truth. The peace she had felt in that room, the impossible knowledge Emma possessed, the pure joy on her daughter's face during these conversations, this was divine intervention. The question now was, what were they supposed to do about it? The next morning brought a decision that would change the Patterson family forever. Sarah woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt since Emma's nighttime conversations began, knowing that she needed to document everything and seek guidance beyond what their small Methodist community could provide. "Jake," she said over breakfast while Emma played contentedly in her high chair, babbling about Mary's pretty blue dress to anyone who would listen, "I think we need to contact someone who understands these kinds of experiences." Jake looked up from his eggs, dark circles under his eyes revealing the sleepless nights that had become their new normal. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone who has experience with apparitions, with religious visions. Someone who can help us understand what's happening to Emma." "Sarah, we're Methodist. We don't really do apparitions and visions. But Catholics do." Sarah's voice was quiet but determined. "There's a Catholic church in Knoxville, St. Mary's Cathedral. They have priests who are trained to evaluate these kinds of experiences." Jake set down his fork. "You want to take our daughter to a Catholic priest?" "I want to take our daughter to someone who won't automatically dismiss what's happening as imagination or medical anomaly." "Jake, what if this is real? What if God has chosen Emma for something special, and we're supposed to help her understand it?" Before Jake could respond, Emma looked up from her breakfast and pointed toward the kitchen window. "Mary says Mama is wise," she announced clearly. "Mary says the nice priest will help us." Both parents stared at their 10-month-old daughter in stunned silence. How could Emma possibly know what they were discussing? "Emma, honey," Sarah said gently, "did Mary tell you about a priest?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Mary says Father Michael has kind eyes. Mary says he helps people understand God's love." Jake's coffee cup clattered against his saucer. "There's no way she could know that name. We've never mentioned any Father Michael." Sarah pulled out her phone and did a quick search for St. Mary's Cathedral in Knoxville. Her hands trembled as she read the staff directory. "Jake," she whispered, showing him the screen. "The pastor is Father Michael O'Brien." 2 days later, the Patterson family found themselves driving through the rolling hills of East Tennessee toward Knoxville, Emma babbling happily in her car seat about seeing Father Michael and pretty church. St. Mary's Cathedral was indeed beautiful, a Gothic revival structure built in 1885 with soaring spires and magnificent stained glass windows that caught the afternoon sunlight and painted rainbow patterns on the stone floor. Father Michael O'Brien was exactly as Emma had described, a man in his early 60s with kind gray eyes and a gentle demeanor that immediately put visitors at ease. He had served as pastor of St. Mary's for 15 years and had encountered his share of unusual spiritual experiences, but nothing quite like what the Pattersons were about to share with him. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice, Father," Sarah said as they settled into his study. Emma sat on her mother's lap, looking around the room with bright, curious eyes. "Of course. Your phone call was intriguing. You mentioned that your daughter has been having experiences with the Virgin Mary." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Father, I want to be clear, we're Methodist. We're not trying to convert or anything. We just need help understanding what's happening to Emma. I appreciate your honesty, and I want you to know that my only concern is Emma's well-being and spiritual health. The Catholic Church takes reports of apparitions very seriously, but we also approach them with careful discernment." Emma suddenly perked up and pointed toward a corner of the study where a small statue of the Virgin Mary stood on a bookshelf. "Mary!" she said excitedly, reaching toward the statue. "Pretty Mary." Father O'Brien's eyebrows rose. She recognizes the image? She's never seen a statue or picture of the Virgin Mary before, Sarah explained. "We don't have any Catholic imagery in our home." "Mary says hello, Father Michael," Emma announced, still pointing toward the statue. "Mary says thank you for helping Emma's mama and daddy." Father O'Brien leaned forward in his chair, his expression intensely focused. "Emma, can you see Mary right now?" Emma nodded and pointed not at the statue, but at the empty space beside Father O'Brien's desk. "Mary is right there. She has a blue dress and a white veil. She's smiling at you." The priest looked toward the area where Emma was pointing, seeing nothing but air. But something in the child's absolute conviction and the specific details she provided made him take her words very seriously. "What is Mary telling you right now, Emma?" Emma listened intently for a moment, then looked back at Father O'Brien. "Mary says you have a good heart. Mary says you help lots of people find Jesus. Mary says she's happy Emma's family came to see you." Father O'Brien felt a chill run down his spine. In his decades of ministry, he had never encountered anyone, adult or child, who claimed to see the Virgin Mary and spoke with such clarity and specific detail. "Emma," he said gently, "when did Mary first come to visit you?" "When Emma was sad in Mama's tummy," the baby replied matter-of-factly. "Mary sang pretty songs to make Emma happy." Sarah gasped. "Emma, you remember being in Mama's tummy?" Emma nodded. "Mary came every day. Mary said Emma was special and would do important work for Jesus when Emma got bigger." Father O'Brien made notes in a small leather journal as Emma continued talking. The child's vocabulary and conceptual understanding were remarkable for her age, but what struck him most was the consistent theology in her statements. Everything Emma said about Mary aligned perfectly with Catholic teaching about the Virgin Mary's role as intercessor and protector. "Father," Jake said quietly, "Emma knew your name before we came here. She said Mary told her about a kind priest named Father Michael who would help us. And she's never been to a Catholic church before today?" "Never. We've raised her in the Methodist tradition." Father O'Brien spent the next hour interviewing Emma and her parents, documenting details about the apparitions, Emma's statements, and the family's religious background. Emma continued to point toward the empty space beside his desk throughout the conversation, occasionally giggling at things only she could hear. "Mary says Emma should show Father Michael the special song," Emma announced suddenly. "What special song, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. Emma began humming the same hauntingly beautiful melody that Sarah and Jake had heard during her nighttime conversations. Father O'Brien's pen stopped moving across his journal page. "Emma, where did you learn that song?" "Mary sings it every night. It's about God's love for babies." Father O'Brien set down his pen, his hands slightly shaking. "Emma, can you sing the words to that song?" Emma nodded and began singing in her sweet baby voice. "Jesus loves the little children, Mary holds them close and tight, angels watch over their sleeping, all through the dark and lonely night." The melody was unlike anything any of them had ever heard, ancient and ethereal, with harmonies that seemed to come from another world. "Father," Sarah whispered, "she's never heard that song before. We've never sung it to her." Father O'Brien was quiet for a long moment, clearly moved by what he had witnessed. "I've been a priest for 38 years, he finally said. "I've encountered many people who claimed to have spiritual experiences. But what I've witnessed here today," Emma's knowledge, her vocabulary, her theological understanding, and especially that song, "this is beyond anything I've ever encountered." "So you believe her?" Jake asked. "I believe that Emma is experiencing something extraordinary. Whether it's truly apparitions of the Virgin Mary, that's a determination that requires extensive investigation by the Church." "What kind of investigation?" "We have protocols for evaluating reported apparitions. Medical examinations, psychological evaluations, theological review. The process can take months or even years." Emma suddenly looked toward the corner again and seemed to be listening intently. Then she turned to Father O'Brien with a serious expression. "Mary says the investigation isn't necessary for Emma. Mary says the important thing is that people believe God loves them. Mary says Emma's job is just to show people that heaven is real and that Jesus cares about babies and families." Father O'Brien felt tears forming in his eyes. The profound simplicity and theological truth of Emma's statement was breathtaking. "Mary says one more thing, Father Michael," Emma continued. "Mary says to tell people that she's not just for Catholic people. Mary says she loves all mamas and all babies, no matter what church they go to." The words hit Father O'Brien like a revelation. Here was a 10-month-old Methodist baby receiving visits from the Virgin Mary and being told that Mary's love transcended denominational boundaries. "Emma," he said gently, "is Mary here with us now?" Emma nodded and pointed again to the space beside his desk. "Mary says goodbye for now, but she'll come back tonight when Emma goes to sleep. Mary says thank you for believing, Emma." Emma waved toward the empty corner, then settled contentedly in her mother's lap as though nothing extraordinary had just happened. The drive home was quiet, each family member processing what had occurred in Father O'Brien's study. Emma fell asleep in her car seat, peaceful as always, while Sarah and Jake grappled with the implications of what they had witnessed. "What do we do now?" Jake asked as they pulled into their driveway. "I think we do what Father O'Brien suggested. We document everything, we pray for guidance, and we trust that God will show us the next step." That night, Sarah set up the video camera again, but this time she also placed a digital audio recorder in Emma's room to capture any sounds that the camera might miss. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Emma began her conversation with Mary, but tonight was different. Instead of just babbling and giggling, Emma seemed to be receiving more serious instruction. "Mary says Emma needs to learn to pray for sick people," Emma said clearly. "Mary says when Emma gets bigger, she'll help make people feel better." Sarah felt chills listening through the baby monitor. "Mary says there's a sick lady at Mama's school who needs prayers. The lady with yellow hair who teaches the big kids." Sarah's heart stopped. Mrs. Jennifer Walsh, the 5th grade teacher with blonde hair, had been diagnosed with breast cancer the week before, but the news hadn't been shared with parents yet, only with faculty. "Mary says to tell the yellow hair lady that Emma prays for her every night. Mary says the lady will get better if people pray hard." The next morning, Sarah faced a dilemma. Should she approach Mrs. Walsh with a message from her 10-month-old daughter who claimed to be receiving visits from the Virgin Mary? It seemed impossible, but Emma's knowledge of Mrs. Walsh's condition couldn't be explained any other way. Sarah decided to call Pastor Williams first. "Pastor, I need your advice about something very sensitive." She explained Emma's message about Mrs. Walsh and her dilemma about whether to share it. "Sarah, if Emma truly is receiving divine messages, then perhaps this is exactly why God has chosen her. To bring comfort and hope to people who are suffering." That afternoon, Sarah approached Mrs. Walsh after school with trembling hands. "Jennifer, I know this is going to sound strange, but my daughter Emma, she wanted me to tell you that she prays for you every night." Mrs. Walsh looked confused. "Your daughter? Sarah, isn't Emma just a baby?" "She is. But Jennifer, somehow she knows about your diagnosis. And she wanted you to know that she's praying for you to get better." Mrs. Walsh's eyes filled with tears. "How could she possibly know? We haven't told the parents yet. I can't explain it. But Emma has been having some very unusual spiritual experiences. She seems to know things that she couldn't possibly know. Are you saying your baby is psychic or something?" "I'm saying that I believe God is using Emma to bring messages of love and hope to people who need them." Mrs. Walsh was quiet for a long moment, then reached out and squeezed Sarah's hand. "You know what? I don't care how she knows. Right now, I need all the prayers I can get. Please tell Emma that Mrs. Walsh says thank you, and that it means more to me than she could ever understand." 3 months later, Mrs. Walsh's cancer was in complete remission. Her doctors called it remarkable and unexpected. But Mrs. Walsh knew exactly who deserved the credit for her healing. Word of Emma's spiritual experiences began to spread quietly through the community. Pastor Williams, after much prayer and consideration, invited the Patterson family to share their story with the congregation during a Sunday service. "Sometimes," Pastor Williams said from the pulpit, "God chooses the most unlikely messengers to remind us of His love. Today, the Patterson family has something extraordinary to share with us." Sarah took the microphone with Emma in her arms, her voice shaking as she told their story. Emma, now 14 months old and speaking in full sentences, occasionally added her own commentary. "Mary loves everyone here," Emma announced to the congregation at one point, pointing toward the pews. "Mary says God's love is bigger than any church building." By the end of the service, there wasn't a dry eye in the sanctuary. People lined up afterward to meet Emma and ask for prayers for their own struggles and concerns. Emma seemed to take it all in stride, offering comfort to grieving widows, encouragement to struggling families, and hope to anyone who asked. Her messages were always simple, always focused on God's love, and always filled with an otherworldly wisdom that left people transformed. Father O'Brien began visiting the Patterson farm regularly, documenting Emma's continuing experiences and marveling at the theological sophistication of her messages despite her young age. "She's becoming a bridge," he told Sarah during one visit. "A bridge between denominations, between doubt and faith, between earth and heaven." Emma's nighttime conversations with Mary continued, but they evolved as she grew older. By age 2, she was sharing detailed messages about prayer, forgiveness, and God's love for families. By age 3, she was asking Mary questions about heaven and relaying the answers to anyone who would listen. "Mary says heaven has the prettiest gardens," Emma told a group of visitors one Sunday. "Mary says people who go to heaven get to help take care of God's flowers, and every flower is a prayer from someone on earth." The visitors left in tears, comforted by the image of their deceased loved ones tending heavenly gardens made of prayers. As Emma grew, so did her reputation as a child with a special connection to the divine. Families traveled from across Tennessee and neighboring states to meet the little girl who talked to the Virgin Mary. Emma never seemed overwhelmed by the attention, treating each visitor with the same gentle compassion that had characterized her from infancy. Mary says everyone is special to God. She would tell people who felt unworthy or forgotten. Mary says God made everyone different because the world needs all kinds of love. The Methodist and Catholic churches in the area began working together in ways they never had before, united by their shared reverence for Emma's spiritual gift and their desire to support the Patterson family. Today, Emma Grace Patterson is 7 years old. She still has her nighttime conversations with Mary, though they're more private now and less frequent. She attends Sweetwater Methodist Church with her family, but she's also developed friendships with Catholic families from St. Mary's Cathedral. Her messages continue to focus on the universal nature of God's love and the importance of faith, hope, and charity in daily life. She's helped heal family divisions, brought comfort to the grieving, and inspired countless people to deepen their relationship with God. Mary says the most important thing is to love each other, Emma recently told a reporter from the Nashville newspaper. Mary says God doesn't care what church you go to if you have love in your heart. The Patterson farm has become an unofficial pilgrimage site, with people from around the world coming to meet the child who bridged denominational divides and reminded everyone that heaven is closer than we think. Emma takes it all in stride, more interested in playing with her dolls and helping her mother in the garden than in the attention her spiritual gifts have brought. But every evening, she still kneels by her bed and says her prayers. "Thank you, Mary, for being my friend," she whispers into the darkness. "Thank you for teaching me about God's love. Help me share that love with everyone I meet." And somewhere in the mystery between earth and heaven, a mother's love continues to watch over a special little girl who is chosen to remind the world that divine love knows no boundaries. And there you have it. This incredible story of divine communication and maternal love touched your heart, didn't it? Emma Grace proved that the Virgin Mary chooses the most innocent messengers to remind us that heaven is real and God's love knows no boundaries, right? If you were moved by this real testimony of how a 10-month-old baby started talking to the Virgin Mary at exactly 3 a.m. every night, speaking words she'd never learned and sharing messages of hope that transformed an entire community, hit that like button below. It really helps me continue sharing these stories that show Mary's love for all children, regardless of denomination. If you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. Every week there's a new testimony that will renew your faith that the Virgin Mary watches over all families and can use anyone, even tiny babies, to share God's love. And don't forget to check out our store in the first pinned comment. We have amazing Christian products, including the 365-day devotional, perfect for strengthening your family's relationship with Jesus and understanding Mary's universal maternal love. Tell us in the comments, have you ever witnessed a child with unusual spiritual gifts? Do you believe the Virgin Mary can speak through babies and young children? And if you also believe in Mary's power to use innocent messengers to share God's love, write, "Mary speaks through innocence." Declare your faith in her maternal protection of all children. Share this video with parents, grandparents, anyone who needs to see that God can work through the smallest and most innocent among us, and with those who need hope that heaven is real and closer than we think. Thanks for watching until the end. May the Virgin Mary bless your family and help you recognize her presence in the innocent voices around you. See you in the next testimony.